In a sun-scorched village at the edge of the desert, life was hard. The fields were cracked and dry, and the well at the center of the village, the only source of water, had long since gone dry. The people had prayed for rain, but the skies remained unyielding, a vast stretch of unbroken blue. Among the villagers was Miriam, a widow with a young son, Elias. They were among the poorest in the village, living in a small hut with barely enough food to survive. Despite her hardships, Miriam's faith remained steadfast. Every day, she knelt beside the well, her hands clasped in prayer, whispering words of hope to a God who seemed silent. "Mama," Elias asked one evening as they shared their last piece of bread, "do you think God still hears us?" Miriam stroked his hair, her heart aching for his innocence. "Yes, my son," she said. "Even when it seems he is silent, he is listening. We must keep believing." One hot morning, as the villagers gathered near the dry well to discuss their plight, a stranger appeared. He was an older man, dressed in a plain robe, with kind eyes and a humble staff. His arrival caused a stir. Outsiders were rare in this forgotten place. "Peace be with you," the man said, his voice calm yet commanding. "I have traveled far and seek only a place to rest." The villagers eyed him warily. "We have little to offer," one of them said. "No water, no food. You will find no comfort here." The stranger smiled. "Even the smallest kindness is enough." Miriam, seeing the weariness in the man's face, stepped forward. "You may rest in my home," she said. "Though I have little, I will share what I can." The stranger nodded gratefully and followed her. Miriam gave the man a place to sit and brought him a small cup of water, the last she had saved for Elias. The stranger drank slowly, his eyes thoughtful. "Thank you," he said. "Your kindness will not be forgotten." Elias, curious, asked, "Where do you come from, sir? And why did you come here, to our village?" The man looked at him, his gaze filled with something deep and unspoken. "I come from where I am sent," he replied, "and I am here because I was meant to be." That night, as the stranger rested, the village elders met. Some were suspicious of him, whispering that he might be a spy or a thief. Others dismissed him as a wandering beggar. But Miriam felt differently. There was something about the man, an air of peace that seemed to follow him. She couldn't explain it, but her heart told her he was no ordinary traveler. The next morning, the stranger stood beside the dry well, gazing down into its depths. The villagers gathered around him, curious. "What do you see?" one of them asked. "A well that is not dry," the man said simply. The villagers murmured in confusion. "It has been dry for months," one exclaimed. "There is no water here." The stranger smiled. "Have faith," he said. Then, turning to Miriam, he added, "Bring me a vessel." Miriam hesitated but quickly fetched a small clay jar. The man took it, knelt beside the well, and lowered the jar into its depths. The villagers watched in stunned silence, certain he would pull up nothing but dust. But when the jar returned, it was full of clear, cool water. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The man handed the jar to Miriam. "Drink," he said. She lifted it to her lips, the water sweet and refreshing. She passed it to Elias, who drank deeply, his eyes wide with wonder. "How is this possible?" someone asked, their voice trembling. The man stood, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "With God, all things are possible. You prayed for water, but you doubted it would come. Faith is not just in asking, but in believing." The villagers began to murmur, some falling to their knees in gratitude, others still skeptical. "Who are you?" one of them demanded. The man's eyes softened. "A messenger," he said, "sent to remind you of his promises." For the next 3 days, the well continued to provide water, but only when Miriam lowered her jar. The villagers flocked to her, grateful and humbled, and she shared the water freely. But on the 4th day, the stranger announced that it was time for him to leave. "Stay," the villagers pleaded. "You have saved us." The man shook his head. "It was not I who saved you," he said. "It was your faith, awakened by hope. The well is but a reflection of the living water that God offers to all who believe." Turning to Miriam, he added, "You were chosen because of your unwavering faith. Continue to trust in Him, and you will never be without." Miriam's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Will we ever see you again?" The man smiled. "Perhaps not in this life, but remember, God is with you, always. With that, he walked away, disappearing into the horizon. The villagers watched him go, their hearts full of awe and gratitude. The well continued to flow, its water a constant reminder of the miracle they had witnessed. And Miriam, once poor and overlooked, became a beacon of faith in the village, her story inspiring others to trust in God's providence. Years later, when Elias was grown, he often recounted the tale of the angel at the well to his children. And though some doubted, the well itself stood as proof, its waters never running dry. And so, the story of the angel at the well spread far beyond the village, a tale of hope, faith, and the miraculous power of God's provision.